Zero.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming back again. This is Ken Shoulders number 32 with John Hutchinson number two, because this is like the second set of papers that we're going to go through and talk about John Hutchinson. I'm pretty excited because next Saturday I'm going to be on a podcast with him, so I get a chance to meet him. And it was really cool because when I did send him the Chris Beskar interviews and some of that stuff, John made the connection to Ken Shoulders and Chris Beskar, which he didn't know because no one knew, because it was all classified and top secret for such a long time, for almost 30 years. So yeah, very cool. Okay, Brandon, I'll let you carry on.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. Okay, so I'm going to read through these first 7 pages, and then Eddie will take over. So,
Yeah,
page one, the Hutchinson effect, a key to the Bermuda Triangle in Vancouver? Question mark, by Guyan Quasar from the Bermuda Triangle website. Long before John Hutchinson began his pioneering experiments into electromagnetism and alternative energy, travelers in the travelers in the Bermuda Triangle had reported odd occurrences involving electromagnetism. The ships or planes would be seized by a strange vapor. Then all equipment would go haywire. Unexplained fogs would sit over the ocean. Yet in all cases, the weather was not right for creating fogs, and there was certainly no reason for electromagnetic aberrations such as they reported. These were in due course put down in the category of sea law sensationalism, or attributed to occultists trying to push their supernatural views of nature. It didn't seem to matter that most of those reporting them were veteran pilots, shipmasters, and even Coast Guard officers. These unusual phenomena quickly formed the backbone of the mythos of the Bermuda Triangle, the enigma of unexplained forces, hints of the laws of nature running wild, of possible time warps, interdimensional transition, wormholes, and invisibility. To speak about them is to speak about the supernatural, the impossible, and the occult until now. Though they remain unexplained, there is no longer the lack of a cross reference for them. And this has to do with electromagnetism. And that's where Vancouver scientist John Hutchinson comes into play. His experiments into electromagnetism has unintentionally produced every phenomena reported in the triangle. The term Hutchinson effect has become a moniker uh, applied to all the peculiar and startling effects his plethora of machinery can produce. John might be likened to many of the fictional characters of movies who stumbled onto fantastic inventions. Flubber, the Shaggy Dog, and the many other Disney movies of Kurt Russell, being transformed by his madcap experiments at the Medfield College. The great exception is that John is not fictional, nor are his experiments. They have penetrated the very building blocks of matter and looked squarely into the labyrinth of time and space, and they are all created by electromagnetism and its effects on various wavelengths. It all began back in 1979. While studying the longitudinal wavelengths of Nikola Tesla, a radio pioneer, Hutchinson limited by space in his small apartment, crammed into one room various devices that emit electromagnetic fields and wavelengths like Tesla coils. radio frequency generators, undergraph generators, etc. He turned them on and went about his work. In some unexpected way, the wavelengths these machines created interplayed to create astonishing effects. John first noticed this when an object touched his shoulder, one he wasn't expecting because it was levitating.
Wow.
Repeated tests have produced a number of astounding effects. These include the continued levitation of objects, wood, styrofoam, plastic, copper, zinc. They hovered and moved about, swirl around and ascend or shoot off at fantastic speeds. With further experimentation, fires started around the building out of non-flammable materials like cement and rock. A mirror smashed 80 feet away. Metal warped and bent and even broke, separating by sliding in a sideways fashion, in some instances crumbling like cookies. Some metal became white hot but did not burn, surrounding flammable material. Lights appeared in the air along with numerous other corona manifestations. Water spontaneously swirled in containers, to name only a few. So in these pictures here, we're talking about aluminium bar above and left, shredded and split by the Hutchinson effect. The metal turned wobbly like jelly before coming apart. This is called cold melting because no heat is involved. Right. Metal cylinder crumbled apart. Photos courtesy of John Hutchinson. More than one observer of Hutchinson's experiments and demonstrations, he has given over 750, have not only been amazed at the results, but uniformly express astonishment at the weak electrical power which seemed to be sufficient to empower very stupefying results. Since basic outlets in the house supply sufficient power to operate his many machines, the power which unleashes all these incredible effects is believed to lie elsewhere, such as where various fields interplay, since on their own, the wavelengths or fields these machines create have never been noted to do this. It is at this point it is at this point call is a warp or vortex, whatever you like. Call it, so I mean that's a typographical error. It is
Yep.
at this point, call it a warp or vortex, whatever you like, where things begin to happen. But how they interact is still largely a mystery. Even where they interact can be perplexing. Sometimes one must wait for days for something to happen, and 99% of the time nothing happens at all. To draw an analogy, it is like trying to boil water without being able to determine the strength of the heat. In such a scenario, it is not surprising it may take different amounts of time to produce the boiling effect. Over the last 22 years, Hutchinson's work has been subject to broad, though varying interest and approval. His laboratory was ransacked by Canadian officials who seized his equipment under the pretense of confiscating his unique gun collection, which was, however, subsequently returned with no explanations or charges.
Hmm.
3 nations have aired his work. He was he was courted by scientists in Japan, accused of treason. Sorry, he was courted by scientists in Japan, accused of treason in Canada when he went to Germany for funds to continue. Los Alamos Lab has done research on his effect. The Canadian government seized his lab equipment once again while created and in transit to Germany in 1990, never returned despite a court order when he was seeking financial aid to continue his studies. The military of Canada and the US has expressed that three, yeah, it's expressed covert interest. He has been arrested by the Canadian government and placed in cuffs on his doorstep while his lab was ransacked and investigated under the excuse of checking on his antique gun collection again. This last incident was on March 17th, 2000, and may have been initiated by a neighbor who experienced an unexpected levitation in a house and then complained to the police.
Wow.
Well, that would be interesting for science, wouldn't it? A great scientific discovery.
Yeah,
And
that's wild.
then complained to the police about it. Because of all this, which has been ongoing for 22 years, his lab has undergone numerous changes, completely disappearing into government hands to vital pieces having been sold off to pay for subsequent financial problems. Nevertheless, John Hutchinson has continued with his work. He has tinkered and adjusted his equipment and continues to get varying and remarkable results, many of which have been documented and photographed by McDonnell Douglas Aerospace and the Planck Institute in Germany. The Hutchinson effect's connection with the triangle comes in many forms. Many of the effects he has created mimic those reported out there. Strangely swirling clouds and lights, green glows and phosphorescence, and electromagnetic anomalies. One discovery in John's experiments clearly underlines the connection of the Bermuda Triangle with electromagnetism. During one experiment, John produced something undeniably triangle-esque. I have personally experienced the grayish type mist when I was doing my high voltage research, and this mist would appear and disappear. To look at it, it looks like metallic. I couldn't see through it. So it exists. It exists. In other tests, objects have appeared that had a cling of grey fog moving about the room, all of which were clearly filmed on 8mm film. So here's a picture of John Hutchinson tinkering in his lab. Hutchinson has developed extensive forms of free energy, including fuel cells and the Hutchinson converter, which apparently can run forever. It was first displayed in Japan in 1996 and is still running. A scientist sees fact, but a philosopher sees potential. John is both.
That's cool.
Oh. One is reminded of Bruce Jernon's feeling that the electronic fog traveled with his plane, or Don Henry's encounter where the fog formed around the metal barge, caused it to vanish, while at the same time affecting all his electronic equipment. While our first instinct is to believe that these forces can only be engineered in a laboratory, a disturbing thought comes from an observation made by electromagnetic researcher Albert Budden. The original way that Hutchinson set out his range of apparatus was by industrial standards, primitive and that's 414. Primitive and crowded with poor connections. I think that's right. Let me just quickly check.
Yep, it is. Yep.
Primitive and go back to 4. Primitive and crowded with poor connections and hand-wound coils. But it was with this layout, with its erratic standards, that he obtained most of the best examples of objects levitating, despite the fact that the maximum power drawn was 1.5 kilowatts. And this form of ordinary power sockets of the house mains, and this from ordinary power sockets of the house mains. These crude ways seemed better adapt at tapping into the vast power all around us. The watts produced in a lab, however, would be infinitesimal compared to the potential in the atmosphere. The estimated power in the atmosphere is best demonstrated during a thunderstorm, in which lightning streaks across the sky with infinitely more watts of electricity, enough to scramble radios and other equipment dozens of miles away, enough to destroy trees and houses and melt sand into glass. But can electromagnetism cause a plane or ship to disappear? John has kept abreast of the unexplained in the world and is well aware of the effects reported in the Bermuda Triangle. In commenting on the applied ramification, he has observed, it is highly probable that nature can form these fields on her own and create the right situation for the ship or aircraft to either totally disintegrate or disappear into another dimension or domain. What should we make of such radio reports like Jensen's, in which he says he is lost in clouds at 150 feet elevation? Remember, he vanished thereafter, but 11 hours later, long after fuel starvation, he re-emerges in time briefly to make one last call 600 miles from where he was lost, only to vanish again without a trace. What about the other Maydays picked up hours after fuel starvation? What about the radio and compass quirks so often reported? Is nature telling us something, or is it guiding us to the potential in natural energy?
Cool.
Is the Hutchinson effect merely a small example of the greater machines in nature?
Wow. Yes.
However esoteric some of this may sound, we may well inject here time's association with gravity and magnetism.
I love that.
Atomic clocks record time passing slightly faster in orbit than at sea level, the difference being that gravity is weaker higher up. Electric current will produce a magnetic field at right angles to it. But since there are 3 planes of space, where is the gravitational plane. No one, including Einstein, could ever find it. What forces are really out there? Electromagnetism may also be a gateway to something far more startling. Mark Stollis writes, it is surmised by some researchers that what Hutchinson has done is tap into the 0 point energy.
Bingo.
This energy gets its name from the fact that it is evidenced by oscillations at 0 degrees Kelvin, where supposedly all activity in an atom ceases. The energy is associated with the spontaneous emission and annihilation of electrons and positrons coming from what is called the quantum vacuum. The density contained in the quantum vacuum is estimated to be by some at 1013 joules per cubic centimeter. Is that 10 to 13 or 1013 joules per cubic centimeter, which is reportedly sufficient to boil off the Earth's oceans in a matter of moments. I think that's 10 to 13. It's a typographical error. 10 to the power of 13. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because you can't, 1013 joules can't boil off the Earth's oceans. I think it's 10 to the power of 13. A disappearance by disintegration seems mild by comparison. A long time ago, biologist Ivan Sanderson noted that the greatest number of disappearances in the world occurred in specific locales, vortices he called them, which lie on the right or east sides of the continents, and all precisely in curious areas where hot surface currents stream out of the tropical latitudes towards the colder waters of the temperate. Is that something at the top? Oh, okay. An example of Sanderson's 12 vortices set at regular intervals around the Earth, brought to his attention by the higher incidence of unexplained disappearance therein. The North and South Pole account for the 11th and 12th vortices.
I found that really interesting because there's the dodecahedron has got 12 surfaces and there's 12 densities in our universe. So that's interesting that the Earth is set up that way too. Sorry, Brendan, you can carry on.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. He explains this is of enormous significance because these are the areas of extreme temperature variabilities, which alone would predicate a very high incidence of violent marine and aerial disturbances. What more likely areas, he continues, for storms and wrecks and founderings and even magnetic anomalies. He went on to ask whether these vast machines, natural machines, generate still another kind of anomaly that might cause something to go wrong or in our space-time continuum. In other words, could they create vortices into and out of which material objects can drop into? So I'll write that again. In other words, could they create vortices into and out of which material objects can drop into and out of other space-time continua. Hutchinson's studies may not prove this, of course, but continuing results prove the unlimited potential of electromagnetism on matter. One of the most remarkable effects is the fusion of dissimilar materials. In describing this, Mark Solis makes note that dissimilar substances can simply come together, yet the individual substances do not dissociate. A block of wood can simply sink into a metal bar, yet neither the block of wood nor the metal bar come apart. Moreover, he adds, there is no evidence of displacement, such as would occur if, for example, one were to sink a bone in a bowl of water. But perhaps one of the most remarkable aspects of his effect is spontaneous invisibility of materials in the active zone of a Ferro's type Hutchinson apparatus.
The Philadelphia experiment, Project Rainbow before it, that's what they actually found as well. Spontaneous invisibility of materials in the active zone. That's interesting, right?
A phenomena which Richard Hull uncovered in historical investigations took place in the Farnsworth fusion machine in the 1930s, where solid metal portions of the apparatus became transport during a number of tests. I think that maybe began to transport during a number of tests.
Mm-hmm.
Philo T. Farnsworth was the inventor of the electronic TV. Hutchinson, that's quite a big invention. Hutchinson has added that invisibility surrounds metallic objects.
Farnsworth, Chris Beskar and David Wilcock talk a lot about Farnsworth and that fusion machine. I have slides on it, but I'll share those at some point. Yeah, they talk a lot about him. So
Properly adjusting his equipment, he adds that the chronons and gravitons accelerated by his technology could cause entire buildings to disappear. The propulsive part of the effect could get us into space faster and cheaper than any conventional fuel. Since the effects and the materials vary exceedingly, it seems logical to assume there is some form of disruption of the basic atomic structure.
wow.
Considering that fusion of non-identical materials fires levitating objects, invisibility, etc., have nothing else in common but these building blocks of matter. Electromagnetism is a doorway into a world of which we are all made. As such, its potential seems unlimited. Since the Earth is itself an object generating electromagnetic fields, are there areas where some of these fields will intermittently interplay and cause aberrations? To be more explicit, is the Bermuda Triangle properly situated on the Earth in the areas of correct temperatures and weather of volatility in areas of electromagnetic stresses to create effects such as Hutchinson has done in his lab. We can no longer say impossible to anything once the doors of the very building blocks of the universe are unlocked.
Mhm.
The dreams and even wistful fantasies of past philosophers and scientists are daily becoming reality in our modern world. It is time we as a species woke up to them. For too long, we called them supernatural when they were not above nature. They were merely above our understanding of it. It is also time that science looks back and it looks beyond a mere fact. We must start looking at potential whether it has immediate profitability or not. The greatest contribution in the Hutchinson effect is that it shows us the great potential in nature all around us. Shall I read this? Return.
That, oh yeah. Well, no, that's just got to do with the Bibliotheca Pleiades site, which is awesome, by the way. It's at the bottom of the page. Yeah. That last thing, the greatest contribution in the Hutchinson effect is that it shows us the great potential in nature all around us. I love that. That's pretty cool. So you thank him, Brandon. I'll read the next one here. Um, and this came off a website called the hutchinsoneffect.ca. John Hutchinson's life changed drastically in 1979 when, upon starting up an array of high voltage equipment, he felt something hit his shoulder. He threw the piece of metal back to where it seemed to have originated, and it flew up and hit him again. Wow, right? This is how we he that this is how he originally discovered fundamental frequencies can shield gravity. So that's a pretty interesting statement right there, right? There's frequencies that can shield gravity. Um, I don't know if John helped write this stuff. He might have. When his Tesla coils, electrostatic generator, and other equipment create a complex intermagnetic electromagnetic field, heavy pieces of metal levitated and shot towards the ceiling, and some pieces shredded. Upon that analysis and through investigation, the Canadian government dubbed his phenomena the Hutchison effect. I didn't know that's where it came from. What is the Hutchison effect? As with much of the new energy field, no one can say for sure. Some theorists think the effect is the result of opposing electromagnetic fields canceling each other out, creating a powerful flow of space energy. I'd say that's pretty close to a good description. The Canadian government also reported uh, invisible samples phasing in and out of existence. Now that's wild. And that probably has a lot to do with white and black EVOs, I think. Um, a Vancouver businessman, George Hathaway, heard about the Hutchison effect in 1980 and contacted Hutchison and brought in a consulting engineer from Boeing Aerospace and the Canadian government to form a company that would promote technology developed from this effect. They called this company Pharos Technology. Many different political factors ensured Hutchison would not be allowed to continue his research unless he signed agreements with either the U.S. government or the Canadian government or the U.S. military. John refused both offers, which is great. Thankfully, he did that. A little while after he returned, he a little while after he returned from Los Alamos military base during one of John's overseas trips to Germany to secure funding from a different government. The Canadian government seized the opportunity to acquire all of John's priceless um, replications of Nikola Tesla's work. So that's a big clue right there too. He was definitely like recreating Nikola Tesla's work. They collaborated with this partner, George uh, Lacaris, who was paid upwards of $70 million for information and samples of John's field stress detector. Wow, I didn't know that. The government also created a false PCB scandal so that they could use the local press to justify their actions and hide the true nature of what the government was actually removing from John Hutchinson's lab located at 13th and Kingsway, Vancouver, BC. After many more years of experiments, demonstrations, and lectures in other countries such as the US, Germany, and Japan, Hutchison returned to Vancouver in 1991. Piece by piece, he bought out of certain Navy surplus equipment, which now had to become a landmark in New Westminster, British Columbia. John has built himself an apartment laboratory second to none. It took several years before he could reestablish his collection. However, despite many obstacles, most political, John, until recently, had his apartment lab equipped to perform for effect or all types of the media demonstrating Hutchinson effect. The mayor of New Westminster forced him to cease in 2006. Then in 2010, John was forcibly removed by order of the mayor, directing the fire marshal to remove him from his famous lab on Fifth Avenue. Under the under the experiment section, you will find John and friends are still developing new ideas and historically engineering suppressed and lost technologies for release and scrutiny by the general public. The Egyptian technology section and Atlantic technology sections are favorite topics of ours and the fans. In John's newsletter, that's I'll have to ask him about that. Um, he has released he has released never before seen previously classified documents from his own works, as well as some of the Department of Defense documentation he has acquired over the years. I know that one of his friends is a DoD guy. I think they've been friends the whole time. From government sources with or without official authorization. Please enjoy this independent scientist website and all it has to offer. John has remained independent regardless of multi-million dollar offers to conceal his findings from the general public. Yeah, right. NASA is among the agencies who turned down, as well as both the North American superpowers offering to privatize or militarize his inventions. John believes in a world of free energy and the marvels of anti-gravity for the general public, not just for those in positions of power. And I'd say we're at the point now where like we're talking about all this stuff. So we're kind of getting to that point where it's going to be in the general view. Now that the government has destroyed his third laboratory and again taken his home from him, where did John end up? Where did John end up with sorry, did John end up with his tiny fixed income and boxes of broken dreams? A German research team bought his entire new Westminster apartment laboratory after seeing demonstrations of his effect and gave him enough seed money to take the whole show on the road with his new wife, Nancy. Yeah, as John travels the US in his newly converted SWAT bus. I'll talk about that in a second. I saw a picture of it. He treats polluted water of the Gulf with the Hutchinson effect, and that's what I'll talk about because I saw that. And researches different possible pollution solutions from his mobile command center. He also remains hopeful his inventions one day will ease the burden and suffering and enrich all of mankind all around the world, rich or poor. In the end, the government didn't crush his spirit and destroy his dreams. Uh, they set him loose. John roams the planet quite freely now with his wife and explores nature's mysteries to this very day. We hope you enjoyed this website, and if you feel the desire to participate in John's event, Ginger, all you need to do is email him. Actually, and that's exactly what I did when I got in contact with him recently. Um, the cool part is they're talking about the SWAT bus, and what I saw was this motorhome with it looked like a directed energy weapon on top, but it was used. He was using it to actually clean up some of the oil spill from the what was it called again? I can't remember that rig that caught on fire. And yeah, so it's very, very cool. Awesome stuff. Some things that we didn't know about. John Hutchinson was there as well too. So do you guys have anything to bring up or
I just thought it was very interesting how the effects that he's producing in the laboratory with electromagnetism and possibly gravity to some extent, that
yeah,
these can be natural phenomena. It also be natural phenomena within nature. Nature can
y- y-
also produce these effects under the right
yeah,
circumstances.
yeah. As a matter of fact, I haven't shared this with you guys yet, and it came from Stavati Aerospace and Chris and David Wilcock there. They're called vacuum domains, and one of the things that they shared with me is when diamonds are formed in these kimber-like pipes, they're called. They think that they come up from the earth, but they don't, because they've actually got proof, and I've got a picture of one of them where it's like a whirlwind that is so powerful it actually compresses time down in a millisecond. You could have like a million or even a billion years, and that's what actually forms these diamonds. And the other thing to know is the Russians are the best at building synthetic diamonds because they have torsional research science and all of the stuff that I'm talking about laid out so well that they're the experts on the planet for creating these diamonds. So yeah, there's a lot of things that and some of these effects probably affect happen in the Bermuda Triangle too, right? Like it's talking about. So very cool. Well, thank you, Brandon, and everyone for coming. Maybe we'll end the recording now and carry on with our meeting.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care.